Chapter 191. The child's face was small, her hands and feet were small, and her body was small. Compared with him, he seemed to be a giant, and she was a little doll. Kevin Kyle held her in his arms clumsily, but she cried and fell asleep in his arms. When she fell asleep, she was mumbling, as if to tell him that she was so sad and no one cared about her. Kevin Kyle stared at the little child for a long time and could not help but lower his head to kiss her face. Maybe it was because of his stubble that she tilted her head and fell asleep again. Now the child was still young, and it was hard to tell whether she looked like him or Karen Daly. But no matter who she looked like, it was the most precious gift Karen Daly gave to him. A few days later, in a cemetery in the Chatterton town, Kevin Kyle stood in front of Karen Daly's tombstone with his daughter in his arms and stood with Karen Daly for a long time. Then he said, "Karen, I have named our daughter Karen Joy Kyle. I only hope she can live a simple and happy life." As soon as Kevin Kyle finished speaking, Nick Black came over and said respectfully, "Director Kevin, the matter you asked us to investigate has already been settled. Miss Reed's studio suddenly caught fire, and there was no trace of anyone doing it. Furthermore, we couldn't find any trace of anyone meddling in Mrs. Kyle's car accident." Kevin Kyle sneered and said, "Faye was burned by the fire. Karen had a car accident on her way to see her. It was perfect timing. It seemed that God specially arranged this time to take Karen Daly's life. Who did Karen Daly offend to make God treat her like this?" Hearing Kevin Kyle's words, Nick Black nodded and said, "Director Kevin, what should we do now?" Kevin Kyle looked at the child in his arms. Seeing that she slept so deeply and sweetly, his heart thumped. If Karen Daly was here, how pleasant would that be? Kevin Kyle's left hand clenched into a fist as he tried to resist the pain in his heart. After a long while he took a deep breath and whispered, "She must be alive." What he said was a declarative sentence, and his tone was positive. Hearing this, Nick Black was slightly stunned, but he didn't say anything. What could he say? Assure Director Kevin that Karen Daly was really gone? Go find her. Kevin Kyle raised his head and looked at Nick Black. His eyes were dead serious. "Even if you turn over the whole earth for me, you must find her for me." After that, Kevin Kyle felt that Nick Black's eyes were full of confusion, as if he was looking at a madman. All of a sudden, Kevin Kyle felt that it was a little funny. Maybe he was really crazy, especially with the definite evidence, but he always felt that Karen Daly was not dead. He really felt that she was still there, but he didn't know where she was. She was waiting for him to find her, and waiting for him to save her. This time, he must not let her down again. Even if the whole world felt that he was crazy, even if the truth was crucial, he would not hesitate to do so. Kevin Kyle's left hand was still clenched into a fist. In a trance, Kevin Kyle saw a picture, Karen Daly and he holding their child's hands and strolling under the sunset. It was so beautiful. The Kyle family, who used to be happy, was all immersed in the haze these days, and everyone's mind was on Kevin Kyle. Kevin's mother was worried about her son so much so that she kept wiping away her tears quietly. She was very clear about her son's character. He had little to say, since he was a child. He kept everything in his heart and never confided in anyone else. Now they knew that Kevin Kyle was sad, but they couldn't find any way to persuade him and comfort him. They could only watch him recover his bloody wound alone. Kevin's father patted Kevin's mother on the back, comforting her. "Rana, Matthew is such a grown-up person. He knows how to adjust his mood. He will be fine." "Will he be fine? What do you think he's been through these days? He's living like a walking dead, if he hadn't been watched by me." Rana cried in her husband's arms when she said that Kevin Kyle had been locked up at home for a few days. "Mom, don't worry. Now that brother had buried my sister-in-law, it proved that he has decided to let it go. We have to believe in him. He will definitely cheer up soon." Mia Kyle also held her mother's hand and tried to persuade her. In fact, she also felt sorry for her brother. He had not had a girlfriend for so many years. Now he finally found a person who he wanted, but suddenly there was no one again. He had been out on a business trip for a few days. When he came back, his wife had turned into a pile of ashes. No one could imagine the pain. It was already very good that her brother could hold on. Grandpa Kyle sat aside and didn't say a word. He slightly narrowed his eyes, and no one knew what he was thinking. After a long time, he interrupted. "Maybe Karen Daly's and Matthew's fate has come to an end. No one should mention this person in front of Matthew in the future. It's better to let him forget it as soon as possible. That's his wife. She gave birth to a daughter for him. I'm afraid he won't forget her in his life," responded Kevin's father. He knew too well how to feel when he loved someone. He was worried about his wife's health, and now his son faced the pain of losing his wife. Being retorted by his son, Grandpa Kyle was a little angry, but he couldn't find any words to refute. He waved his hand and said, "I am tired. I'll go back to the room and rest for a while. You'll wait for him to come back. Grandpa, I'll send you back to your room." Mia Kyle helped Grandpa Kyle to go upstairs. Grandpa Kyle patted her hand and said, "Mia, you should take care of your brother more often and help him take care of the child. He is a man. He doesn't know how to take care of the child." Mia Kyle nodded and said, "Grandpa, I will." As soon as Grandpa Kyle went upstairs, Kevin Kyle came back. He, who had always been polite, didn't greet his parents who were sitting in the living room, but went straight upstairs with his child in his arms. Matthew, Kevin's mother called him. Mom, what's the matter? Kevin Kyle stopped and looked back at his mother. His tone was flat and his expression was cold, as if he had returned to the old Kevin Kyle, who was so cold that no one dared to get close to him. About Karen, Mama Kyle began saying. Mom, your granddaughter's name is Karen Joy Kyle. From now on, she will be called Karen. Kevin Kyle interrupted Mama Kyle and said. Mama Kyle still wanted to say something, but Aunt Anne rushed in and said, Young master, please have a look. Momo did not eat or drink these days. It seems that she's dying. Momo has not been eating for a few days, and you're only telling me this now. Kevin Kyle looked at Aunt Anne with a gloomy face, and his eyes were fierce. Young master, it's because I saw that you were, Aunt Anne said nervously. These days, Kevin Kyle had locked himself up because of Karen's matter, and even the Kyle family couldn't get close to him. How could they, as servants, have a chance to inform him? Chapter 192. When he came to see Momo, Kevin Kyle almost couldn't recognize him. It had only been a short period of time. Momo, which used to be as chubby as a ball, had lost a lot of weight. She stayed in her bed, weak and powerless, like she was struggling to breathe. Momo? Kevin Kyle swatted beside it and gently called it, while stretching out his hand to stroke her head. Lul? Hearing Kevin Kyle's voice, she tried hard to open her eyes. There seemed to be tears in her eyes. Momo, don't be afraid. I've called the doctor. The doctor will come soon. Kevin Kyle picked it up and carefully held it in his arms. Woo. Whoa. She shook her little head gently, as if to say that she didn't want to see the doctor. She wanted to live with her mother instead. It was meaningless for her to stay. She wanted to go to another world to find her mother. Kevin Kyle wanted to say something else, but after 2 whines, Momo closed her eyes, lowered her head, and swallowed her last breath. Momo. Kevin Kyle held her in his arms, clenching one hand into a fist, trying his best to restrain his heartache. Karen had gone. Now Momo was leaving. Why didn't she want to stay with him? 3 years later. The world-class fashion lingerie show, which was held once every 3 years, was running in full swing in Milan. Apart from the glamorous models on the stage, the backstage designers were also the top figures in the industry. The works designed by the freshmen, who were able to be in the upper class, must be eye-catching. They were excellent, so they had the opportunity to let the models put on their works and go on the stage. The catwalk show was about to begin. The designers and models at the backstage were still busy, hoping that the models could model their designs well. There were a blend of models from different parts of the world, most of which were Caucasians. There were some Eurasians and Asian models, which looked equally stunning too. A model that stood out was called Heather Sue, who was one of the top-performing models in the industry. She was 183 centimeters tall, with a perfect body, and looked like an angel. Heather Sue's designer was the only newcomer designer in this fashion show, Asteria. Asteria was less than 1.7 meters tall. She was slender, and her delicate face was exquisite. She had a special aura with her. She always quietly attracted others' attention. She was busy doing the final check for Heather Sue. She was so serious and focused that she didn't notice that there was a person who had been staring at her for a long time. Her thick black hair was casually tied up in a bun, and 2 strands of thin hair fell down from her forehead. Perhaps it was the first time for her to take part in such a fashion show. She was a little nervous, and her forehead was covered with a layer of sweat. The work she designed was a secret, and it was approved by her peers, where they recommended her to participate in this fashion show. Many people would not get such an opportunity, even if they worked hard for their whole life. However, she, who seemed to be young, managed to get this opportunity. Asteria? The man gently read her name, with a meaningful radiance hanging on the corner of his mouth, and his eyes were fixed on her. All the attention of Asteria was focused on her model. The model went to the catwalk in her own work. When she heard the applause from the audience, she took a deep breath. After 3 years of hard work, her work finally went on stage, which meant that her work had gone on the way to the world. When Heather Sue stepped out of the stage, she came over and gave Asteria a big hug. Asteria, thank you for designing such a good work. This is definitely a winning glory for you. Asteria smiled and said, I'm not as great as you think. I just want my work to be seen by more people. I want more people to enjoy my work. Asteria? A man's voice sounded behind them. Asteria and Heather Sue turned back at the same time and saw a man with black hair and brown eyes. He smiled and looked at them with a faint smile. He wore a modern suit. The shirt in the suit was in a mess, and his hair was not groomed neat too. It seemed that he had just gotten out of bed. Perhaps it was because of his unique personality that people in the fashion industry would recognize him instantly. Ivan was a genius in fashion design. When he was in his 20s years ago, he had won many international awards. At that time, no one could catch up with him. However, he was extremely arrogant, and not everyone could win his favor. Ivan, are you looking for me? Being acknowledged by a genius master in the fashion industry, Asteria was really flattered. Asteria? He looked her up and down. His eyes were scanning through her, but Asteria didn't mind. Your name is Asteria? Asteria nodded. Is there any problem? Looking straight into her eyes, Ivan asked. What's your real name? Asteria said. Well, I don't recall having another name. Out of respect for this genius designer, whatever Ivan asked, Asteria answered honestly. So you grew up around here? Ivan smiled and said, how about having a meal together after the event? Asteria smiled apologetically. After the event, there will be a dinner party in our company, so I'm sorry. I can't eat with you. It doesn't matter. I can join you. Even after being rejected, he didn't feel embarrassed. This was his personality. He makes his own decisions, and the rest was not within his consideration. Asteria wanted to add on, but Ivan responded quick, I don't eat much, so don't reject me again. Asteria was speechless at his words, but Ivan waved his hand and said, I'm going to do my work. See you later. After saying that, he turned around and left. Asteria looked at his back and shook her head helplessly. It was the first time that she had met such an unreasonable person. There was no way she could reject him. Heather Sue said, Asteria, do you know Ivan? Asteria said, he's so famous. It'll be strange if I don't know him. Heather Sue thought for a moment and said, he rarely will take the initiative to talk to people. When others approach him, he'll just ignore them. I think he's interested in you. Asteria said, well, by that logic, Heather Sue, are you also interested in me? Heather Sue shrugged with a helpless expression. All right, you win. Chapter 193. At the end of the fashion show, Asteria won 2 prizes, the Newcomers Award and the Best Fashion Design Award. She became the first young designer who won the Newcomers Award and the Best Fashion Design Award together at this fashion show. While receiving the trophy, Asteria had also gotten a big bonus. More importantly, she finally reached her life's dream and became a designer that was recognized by professionals in the industry. For Asteria, the most important thing was that with status, she could make more money. Then she could live in a bigger house with her father and live a better life. Asteria had a serious illness 3 years ago. After recovering from the serious illness, she lost all the memories she had before. She didn't even remember who she was. Fortunately, her father accompanied her to restore her memory, and also helped her realize her talent in fashion design so that she could get today's good results. Now she had opened a studio with a few friends she knew from Milan. They were responsible for the design work, and her father was responsible for the business. The studio had a total of 5 designers, including Asteria. There were 3 men and 2 women in the team. Moreover, the 5 of them were all founders and stakeholders of the studio. They came from all over the world and had different living styles. However, they seemed to work like a harmonious family. However, Ivan was a well-known genius designer in the fashion design industry. When they heard that he was going to have dinner with them, everyone was very excited and thought that it would be better to take the opportunity to know him better. Asteria explained the situation to her team because she wanted them to oppose the idea, but it turned out that they liked the idea. Ivan sat next to Asteria. Other people wanted to talk to him, but he ignored them. His eyes fell on her face as if he wanted to see through her. Being stared at during the meal, Asteria felt uncomfortable, but she persevered and didn't lose her temper. After a long time, Ivan finally said, Miss Asteria, you look like someone I've met before. Asteria was drinking juice. When she heard what he said, she looked up and smiled at him, saying, Mr. Ivan, I hope that your next sentence would not be that you fancy me or you want to pursue me. What if I say so? Ivan laughed even more arrogantly. Asteria smiled and said, After all, it's your freedom. However, after taking a sip of the wine in his glass, he said casually, I'm sure since you have been looking at Leo's face all this time, no other man will be able to catch your eye. Astonished, Asteria looked at Ivan with confusion. Who's Leo? I don't understand what you're talking about. Ivan shook the glass, raised his eyebrows and said with a smile, Mrs. Kyle, Mr. Kyle has been looking for you for the past 3 years. Are you going to keep hiding from him? Mrs. Kyle? Mr. Kyle? Asteria was even more confused. She didn't know if Ivan had a problem with his mind and tried to tell her some nonsense. Well, I don't care if you really don't remember or act like you don't. I would not tell Leo that I've met you. He is upset at losing you, but I enjoy the moment that I know something he doesn't know. I don't want to get myself into trouble. As he spoke, Ivan paid attention to the expression on Asteria's face. She was so calm that it didn't seem like she was pretending. Was she really just someone who looked a lot like that person? Asteria didn't answer because she didn't know what to say. I have a series of pending work, and I will shoot some photos for a magazine in a few days. I am wondering if you would be keen to model? I'm sorry, I'm only interested in fashion design, and I'm not interested in being a model. Asteria rejected the offer without thinking. In addition to her disinterest because of her health, her father would not allow her to work on other things. Ivan did not pursue any further. He gave her his business card and asked her to call him whenever she needed help. Although Asteria felt that she would not have any connections with Mr. Ivan, she still put the business card in her card holder respectfully. After dinner, Asteria returned home. Her father was watching TV in the living room. When he saw her coming in, he smiled and said, Hey, my little girl, I'm really happy for you. Asteria changed her shoes and went to her father's side. She gave him a big hug. Dad, it's all your credit that I can get this award. If it weren't for you, there wouldn't be me in this world. If it weren't for you, I wouldn't be here. Hey, don't talk nonsense. I am your dad. If I don't treat you well, then who shall I take care of? Samuel Daly smiled and stroked the head of Asteria, but his eyes were fixed on the TV screen. It was an exclusive interview on a finance show. The person who was interviewed was a member of Rovio Corporation Inc., Leo Kyle, who was never willing to show his face on TV 3 years ago. In the past 3 years, in order to find his missing wife, he had put in a lot of effort and spent countless manpower and financial resources. He, who had never shown his face in front of the media before, often appeared in front of the camera after the incident. Perhaps he wanted to tell Karen Daly that no matter where she was, he was by her side. At the thought of this, a cold but proud smile flashed across Samuel Daly's eyes. They wanted to hide from him, and Kevin Kyle couldn't find them even if he had the ability to do so. What's worse for Kevin Kyle would be the fact that Karen Daly, whom he had been searching for, had completely forgotten about him. Even if she saw him in front of the TV at this time, she would not have any reaction. It was said that the medicine they gave Karen Daly would cause dysfunction to her memory abilities, and if she did not restore her memories within 3 years, so she would never regain her memories in the future too. He changed her name and hid in such a place with Karen Daly for 3 years. He observed her for 3 years, and it seemed to be going well. In this way, it was impossible for Karen Daly to recover her memories, so it was time for him to execute the long-prepared plan. Samuel Daly said, "I have something else to tell you." Asteria nodded. "Dad, tell me, I'm listening." Samuel Daly said, "Are you willing to go back to our hometown with me?" Asteria asked, "Do you mean Chatterton Town?" Her father once told her that there were many bad memories in Chatterton Town, and he didn't want to go back for the rest of his life. What made him change his mind? "I'm old, I want to go back and have a look. There's a big company that is recruiting for a fashion designer over there. I think you can try that out," Samuel Daly said as he poured a glass of water for Asteria and handed the medicine to her. "Take the medicine first. Let's talk about other things later." "All right." Asteria picked up the medicine and swallowed it. She never doubted the medications. Chapter 194. For the past 3 years, Asteria had been living in Milan. She was used to the lifestyle of this city. She especially liked the fashion scene of this city. She didn't want to leave the country, but her father treated her very well and did a lot for her. Her mother died early, and her father did not remarry to take care of her. He invested a lot in her. In order to take care of her, her father almost gave up his life and pinned all his hopes on her. He also gave her enough space and trust so that she could show her skills in the field she liked. Asteria had no way to repay such kindness. Therefore, her father was getting old and wanted to go back to his homeland. She had to accompany her father. Fortunately, her work is flexible. As long as she has a computer, a pen, and a draft, she could do her work anywhere. It was 2 o'clock in the afternoon when the plane arrived at the Chatterton International Airport. As soon as Samuel Daly got off the plane, he looked at Asteria with a smile and asked softly, "Karen, do you have any impression of this place?" "Yes," Asteria nodded. "Yes?" Samuel Daly was shocked. Asteria smiled and said in a cute way, "Airports are mostly like this. There's a lot of crowds." Samuel Daly breathed a sigh of relief when he heard that. He patted her head and said, "You know how to joke me." In Chatterton Town, she was not familiar with it at all. Everything was very strange to her. This kind of unfamiliarity made her feel a little uneasy and agitated. Therefore, after she settled down at home, she informed Samuel Daly and carried a backpack. She was ready to go out for a day to get familiar with the environment and crowd. Milan was a very romantic city. People there felt that they wanted to enjoy life, not to work. However, this Chatterton Town seemed like an upbeat city. When sitting in the restaurant for dinner, many people were wolfing down their food. After finishing eating, they had to rush to work. This was Asteria's impression after wandering around alone for more than half a day. However, Chatterton Town's nature scene was not bad. For example, Noble Park was full of flowers when she visited, and the park was full of visitors. Many couples snuggled up in front of the flowers, and many parents were enjoying the warm sunshine with their children. Just as Asteria was enjoying the city, someone suddenly pulled her sleeves lightly. It was a gentle pull, like a kitten's pull. Asteria stopped and looked back. It was a 3-year-old little girl. She was very beautiful. Her big eyes seemed to be filled with gems, but also seemed to contain stars, twinkling and very dazzling under the sunshine. Her features were exquisite, and she had a very lovely ponytail. She looked sweet and innocent. Asteria looked at the little girl and could not help being stunned. For some reason, she felt that this child looked a little like her. "Hello, miss. Can you help me?" Looking at the beautiful woman, the cute little girl continued to pull Asteria's clothes and she pouted. How could the beautiful miss ignore her when she looked so cute? The little girl held her head high and stared at Asteria, showing a very innocent and vulnerable expression. After being stared at by the little baby girl, Asteria panicked and quickly got rid of the other thoughts in her mind. She squatted beside the little baby girl and reached out to touch her fair and tender face. She asked softly, "Kid, what's wrong? What do you want me to do for you? Where are your parents?" After that, Asteria looked around again. How could such a little child not be watched by adults? What if she was taken away by bad guys? Dad's working and Mom is flying in the sky, the little baby girl said seriously. Flying in the sky? Asteria was stunned. Is this another saying for taking a plane? So are you here alone? Asteria asked again. No. The little girl shook her head and smiled innocently. Sister, aren't you here to accompany me? The little baby girl smiled innocently, but Asteria had a headache. It seemed that the child was completely out of control, and the person who took care of her was nowhere to be found. How could she leave such a lovely child alone? While she was thinking, the little baby girl suddenly grabbed Asteria's hand. Her little hand was so small that she could only hold Asteria's fingers. She shook it again, as if she wanted to attract the attention of this beautiful woman. Asteria couldn't help but smile at her. Looking at her lovely face, she pinched it again. When she was about to speak, she heard a little baby girl say in a positive way, "Give me $100. Asteria was stunned. Dad said, "If you pinch me, you'll have to give me $100. The little baby girl patiently explained. Looking at her serious look, Asteria finally realized that the little baby girl was talking about the pinch on her face that will cost $100. This child's father was really short of money. How could he raise the child like this? But I don't have money, Asteria teased. Then you'll have to help me. Okay, what can I do for you? It seemed that she finally remembered something important. The little girl's bright smile suddenly faded off. She said sadly, "My sister is bleeding. She's going to die." Seeing the little girl's serious look, Asteria was shocked and hurriedly said, "Where is she? Take me there." The little girl raised her hand and pointed to the distance, only to find a white puppy lying under a tree. "Is that your sister?" The little baby girl nodded desperately, and her watery eyes were suddenly filled with tears. Yes, my sister is in pain. Is she going to fly into the sky too?" Asteria's heart missed a beat. It turned out that "in the sky" meant dead. "No, it won't." Asteria hurriedly comforted her. "Come on, let's save her." After that, she held the little girl's hand and walked to the dog. The dog sensed someone approaching and sniffed her. It wagged its tail excitedly and barked at the little owner. They didn't know what the dog wanted. The little girl said, "Momo, be a good girl. She will help you cure your wound." Woof woof. Asteria checked the puppy slightly and found that there was a 3-centimeter-long wound on its leg. Apparently it was scratched by some wire. After thinking for a while, she took out a regular Band-Aid from her bag and carefully put it on the dog. "Hey, little girl, what's your name?" "Karen. Isn't it a nice name? Beautiful. I'll tell you a secret. My name's Karen as well." Chapter 195. At first, the little baby girl looked at Asteria with shock, and then she pointed at Asteria. "You're Big Karen." Then she pointed at herself. "I'm Little Karen." Then she made a gesture with her chubby little hand and said, "We're two Karens." Little Karen looked very cute. Big Karen laughed out loud. "Little Karen, why didn't your family accompany you? Such a lovely child was left here." If it weren't for her conscience, Asteria really wanted to take this child home and raise her. "Aunt Lynn is over there, and Brother Kobe is also over there." Little Karen pointed to a woman and several bodyguards. Their eyes were fixed on them, and they were observing the pair. Asteria instantly understood that there were many people watching over her. Maybe the little fellow didn't want so many people following her, so those people could only watch her from a distance. She was so small and had her own opinion. When she grew up, she would be definitely strong-minded. Asteria was trying to accompany little Karen to go back to those people when her phone rang. She took out her mobile phone, and it was her father. Asteria did not answer directly. She smiled apologetically at the little girl and said softly, "Little Karen, I'm going to work. I'll play with you in the future, okay?" "Okay." The little baby girl agreed and said, "Daddy likes me the most, so if there is another Karen, he'll be happy." Asteria shook her head. She wanted to refute that statement, but couldn't afford to offend a cute little girl. "Big Karen, thank you for saving my sister." Little Karen looked at Big Karen with a lovely and bright smile. "My sister likes you a lot." Woof, woof, woof. The little dog also barked a few times, indicating that it agreed. "Well, I like you too, little Karen. Goodbye." Big Karen said goodbye to little Karen and touched her little face again. Looking at little Karen, a strong sense of reluctance emerged in Big Karen's heart. Such a beautiful and lovely child. She really wanted to spend more time with her. She stood up and said goodbye to little Karen again. "The world is so big. See you again. Maybe we won't see each other again." Rovio Corporation Inc.'s office tower in Chatterton Town was the new landmark of the Chatterton Town. As the headquarters of Rovio Corporation Inc. in the country, it lived up to its name. There were 88 floors in total, and the 85th to the 88th floors were meant for sightseeing. From the 85th floor to the 87th floor, it served as the company's resting and entertainment area. On the 88th floor, there was a sightseeing area and a children's playground. To put it bluntly, this floor was the playground prepared by Leo Kyle for his daughter. When he took her to work, she would not feel bored as there was a place for her to play. Most of the time, Kevin Kyle would bring his daughter to work. At work, he asked his babysitter to play with her. Today, Kevin Kyle just came back from a business trip and was at the headquarters. After he came back, he was busy holding an important meeting. He asked some people to take care of little Karen by bringing her outdoors. He would pick her up after he finished the meeting. In the bright and spacious meeting room, the atmosphere was very tense. Because of Kevin Kyle's gloomy face, the managers sitting around the conference table were particularly cautious, due to the fear of having their big boss be dissatisfied with their work. As the host of this meeting, the chief manager of the real estate development in the Western region was even more frightened. Whenever he said a word, the face of the big boss darkened, which made him feel that he made a mistake. A long while later, he couldn't continue anymore. He wiped his cold sweat and said, "President Kevin, if there is anything wrong with me, please tell me directly. Just say it directly. Don't use your cold eyes. Your gloomy face is scary, okay?" He thought to himself, but was so scared that he almost cried. "The details of the project are very good. Let's continue," Kevin Kyle said. His face was still serious, and his voice was also cold, but the words were praises. The incongruent messages made the team leader of the Western group even more frightened. He thought it over and over again. He just couldn't figure out why was his boss so unhappy. How could he torture him like this? One manager stammered with fear, "President Kevin, Kevin Kyle raised his eyebrows and said impatiently, "Nathan Jim will be in charge of this project, and you will be his assistant. As for the project on Fallon Lime's side, no matter what method you use, you'll have to take it down, and the profit could be reduced by 1%. Kevin Kyle spoke very quickly, but several secretaries next to him still remembered his words clearly. After saying that, he turned around and left. Amelia Gray and Nick Black immediately followed, and Nick Black said, "President Kevin, Nathan Jim had never been in charge of this job. If he tries to, I'm afraid." "No, we wouldn't know until we try it." Kevin Kyle walked away and gestured for his assistants to now follow him. He returned to his office, pulled out a chair, and sat down. He stretched out his hand to massage his temples. In a trance, he thought of a figure that was very clear, but also very vague. 3 years. 3 whole years. He would think of her every day and dream of her every night, but her appearance was getting more and more blurred. He couldn't remember what she looked like. There was a photo frame on his desk. In the photo, there was his daughter little Karen, little Momo, and him, however, without her. Without her, what made him happy was his lovely daughter, Karen. It had been a while since they parted. He had to go and see her, or the little girl would be angry with him again. When Kevin Kyle came to the park not far away from the company, Karen was keeping herself busy. He had already walked to her side, but she didn't notice him yet. He reached out and pinched her little face gently, which immediately attracted Karen's attention. He smiled very gently and said, "Karen, what are you looking at?" "I'm looking at Big Karen." Karen threw herself into her father's arms and jumped a few times. "Big Karen's as beautiful as me." Kevin Kyle looked in the direction that Karen had been looking at just now. He looked around and found nothing. Even if he did, it was just his dream. "Dad, my sister is hurting." Karen was happy, but she still remembered her sister, who was lying on the side because of her injury. Momo was injured, and there was a bandage on her leg. Kevin Kyle asked, "Who was the one who helped her?" "Big Karen." Karen pointed to the direction in which Big Karen had disappeared. "A very beautiful Big Karen.